Sometimes in the middle of an ordinary day, something strange happens. You might be stuck in traffic, standing in an elevator, or brushing your teeth, and suddenly, without fully understanding why, you feel that something is off. It's not exactly pain. It's not exactly sadness. It's something quieter, heavier, like a kind of tiredness that isn't in your muscles but deep inside your chest, a kind of emptiness that doesn't hurt but still feels like it's pressing down on you. It's as if your very existence is slightly misaligned, like a chair with one short leg that never quite sits flat. You feel it, but you don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. Everyone seems too busy pretending they're okay, too busy trying to make life work, too busy holding everything together and not losing their minds. But behind the silence, behind the jokes, the goals, the daily stories online, there's a question that almost no one says out loud. What if none of this really means anything? What if we're just stacking up days like someone trying to stack air? This video is not a collection of answers. It's a risk. Because today, we're going to open one of the darkest and most honest books in the entire Bible, Ecclesiastes. This book is so brutally sincere that for some, it almost sounds like heresy. It was written by a man who had everything and still couldn't carry the weight of having everything. Think about that. Wisdom, wealth, pleasure, fame. The kind of life that today would look flawless on social media. It would be a polished feed, a TED Talk, a best-selling biography. But in the end, this man said, "Vanity of vanities, everything is vanity." Or in the original Hebrew, Hevel, smoke, vapor. Something that looks solid but slips through your fingers the moment you try to hold it. Have you ever felt that? Gotten what you wanted, and yet something bitter still lingered? Looked at someone you love and quietly wondered how long they'll still be here? Reached a big goal only to realize it didn't change the hollow feeling inside? Ecclesiastes isn't a manual, it's a mirror. And it might just be the cruelest one of all, because it doesn't show us how to win at life. It shows us that no one does. Not the righteous, not the wicked, not the wise, not the fool. We all end up in the same dust. But here's the twist. This book, this strange, dark, almost uncomfortable book, might also be one of the most liberating. Yes, everything is vanity. But maybe that's why living now matters so much. There are moments when you stop listening to music without even realizing why. You open Spotify, stare at the screen, and press nothing. It's not that you don't have time. It's not that you don't like the songs anymore. It's that at some invisible point, life lost its soundtrack. It doesn't sound dramatic, but it is. Because when pleasure turns into noise, when beauty loses its flavor, when everything new starts feeling too much like everything old, something in you has quietly died. It's the exhaustion of too much. And it doesn't strike like a hammer. It rusts like old iron. Slowly, quietly, until you can't ignore it anymore. The author of Ecclesiastes lived through this long before us. Not because of poverty, but because of abundance. And that changes everything. He writes, "I built houses for myself, planted vineyards, made gardens, gathered wealth, owned servants, collected treasures, surrounded myself with pleasures. Everything my eyes desired, I did not deny them." This is not the confession of a monk. It's the last journal entry of a lucid hedonist, someone who tasted everything the world could offer and still found himself empty. And in the end, he says, "Behold, it was all vanity, a chasing after the wind." Today, psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill, a concept showing how every pleasure or achievement eventually fades, and we return to the same starting point of desire. One more promotion, one more body, one more like, and then nothing. The writer David Foster Wallace saw this pattern too. He said, "Everybody worships something. The only choice is what to worship. And almost everything you worship will eat you alive." And we are being eaten alive. We live in a time where pleasure is everywhere, but meaning is scarce. Porn is one click away, but intimacy has become a fear. Food is fast, but eating has become guilt. Entertainment is infinite, but minds are bored. Desire has turned into an algorithm. The heart has become a product. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. But the man in Ecclesiastes saw something even worse. That between pain and boredom, there's a fake relief, a dried up pleasure, a quiet anesthesia that hides the absurdity of everything. And here's the point where, if this were a typical video, I'd give you a solution, a 5-step escape plan, a how to fix your life moment. But doing that would be dishonest, because the harshest truth is there is no easy escape from saturation. When everything is possible, nothing has weight. When everything is within reach, nothing feels like a true conquest. That's why the narrator of Ecclesiastes matters so much today. He isn't depressed, he's awake. He climbed to the top and realized there was no sky there. Milan Kundera once wrote, "Vertigo is not the fear of falling, it's the desire to fall." And maybe that's what we feel sometimes. Not fear of losing everything, but a strange, dark curiosity to see if losing everything might finally wake something up inside us. This chapter doesn't end with comfort. It ends with a quiet, uncomfortable noise, like the silence of a song that used to be your favorite, but doesn't play anymore. The spoon touched the plate. She said, "God has a purpose for everything." It was a funeral. Her father had just died at 49 from an aggressive cancer. Nobody knew what to say, so everyone just nodded, as if faith was the same as acceptance. But deep down, she didn't believe what she said. She was only repeating a sentence she had heard 1,000 times, the kind of line that comes out when words can't keep up with pain. Inside, what she really wanted to ask was the question almost no one dares to speak. Where was God when everything fell apart? The brutal truth is that the Bible holds that question too. It's not hidden, it's right there in Ecclesiastes. With much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. It's the verse most sermons skip, but it's there, raw and unfiltered. The more you understand life, the more unbearable it becomes. The wise suffer not because they're weak, but because they're awake. Ecclesiastes was written by someone who knew God, not just by hearing about him, but by speaking with him. The text is often attributed to Solomon, the man who asked for wisdom instead of power. And what he saw through that wisdom was a broken world, a God who doesn't answer, a time that doesn't explain, a justice that fails again and again. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called this the anguish of faith, that moment when believing stops being comforting and starts being terrifying. Believing without guarantees, loving without return, trusting the sacred when the world only shows ruins. And that's why many people don't abandon faith because of reason. They abandon it because of trauma. When pain is real, no abstract idea can comfort you. C.S. Lewis, mourning his wife, once wrote, "Go to God when your need is desperate. What you find is a door slammed in your face and the sound of bolts being drawn on the inside." He didn't stop believing. He just stopped pretending that faith is the same thing as comfort. Simone Weil went even further. To her, God's absence isn't proof against him. It's his deepest language. Love that doesn't force itself. Silence that respects our pain. The sacred stepping back so it doesn't manipulate us. That's hard to accept because we've been taught to treat God like a spiritual insurance plan. If you pay with prayers and good deeds, he will fix things. But Ecclesiastes tears that contract apart. The writer watches the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper. The fool laughs and the wise die just the same. He asks, what's the point of all this, if even God seems incoherent? And here lies something few dare to say out loud. Maybe mature faith isn't about understanding God, but about enduring him. Enduring the silence, enduring the contradictions, believing not because everything makes sense, but because without something beyond us, everything becomes unbearable. Ruben Alves once said, "Faith is not a light that removes all darkness. It's a lamp that lights only one step at a time." That's exactly what Ecclesiastes does. No promises of happy endings, no revelations that explain everything. Just a man looking at the heavens, seeing them closed, and still choosing to keep going, to keep speaking, to keep existing. Maybe that's what faith really is. Staying even when the signal is gone. Walking even when the ground isn't there. Living even when God is silent. But Ecclesiastes whispers the opposite. It looks us straight in the eye and says, "You're not in control. You never were." There is a time for everything under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. People often read this verse like a comforting poem. It isn't. It's a list of everything we can't control. It's not about picking the right moment, it's about accepting that the moment picks you. We live in a culture that disguises randomness with spreadsheets. We love telling ourselves that everything can be achieved through discipline, intelligence, and hard work. But that's a pretty lie dressed like a motivational speech. The truth is closer to what Baruch Spinoza said. Men think themselves free because they are conscious of their actions, but they are ignorant of the causes by which they are determined. You think you decided, but maybe you just obeyed something you don't fully understand. A fear, a wound, a trauma, an algorithm. And time, this polite, relentless tyrant, keeps moving forward, without asking, without permission. You can be young and die tomorrow. You can eat healthy and still have a stroke. You can do everything right and still be crushed by randomness. Daniel Kahneman showed this clearly. Most of our future predictions are cognitive illusions. Our brains hate uncertainty, so they invent stories of control, even if those stories are lies, especially if they are lies. Ecclesiastes destroys all of that with one sentence: time and chance happen to them all. Meritocracy can't survive this verse. Self-help collapses here. Your 5-year plan turns into superstition. But, and this part matters, the book doesn't preach fatalism. It doesn't say, give up. It says, know the limits of your control. You can plant the seed, but you can't decide if it will rain. You can love, but you can't force someone to love you back. You can live well, but you can't escape death. Clarice Lispector once wrote, life is made of days that mean nothing, and moments that mean everything, and none of them can be scheduled. Control is a comforting myth, and maybe letting go of it, not from apathy but from awareness, is the moment life becomes real, not a project. Ecclesiastes doesn't teach this with rage, it teaches it with a strange, tender brutality. Like someone looking at you gently and saying, you control nothing, but you can still be fully here. Most religions are built on a promise. If you're good, things will make sense. If you follow the rules, there will be order. If you pray hard enough, the pain will mean something. But Ecclesiastes looks straight at that promise and says, no. It doesn't deny God. It doesn't glorify rebellion. It simply reveals what people don't want to hear, that the world is absurd even with God in it. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. This isn't the voice of an atheist. It's the voice of a believer who saw too much. He prayed, built, ruled, and watched everything collapse like sandcastles at the edge of time. This is not a story of a man losing faith. It's the story of a man losing illusions. That's a different kind of fall, more silent, more honest. Friedrich Nietzsche called this kind of clarity the great noon, that moment when shadows disappear and the world is seen as it is, without a mask. No rewards, no cosmic fairness, just what is. And here is the paradox. This is where real freedom begins. Not in believing that the universe owes you something, but in walking through it with open eyes, stripped of guarantees. When Albert Camus wrote about the absurd, he didn't offer solutions. He said the only honest response to an absurd world is to live it consciously. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not because the rock will ever stay at the top of the hill, but because meaning isn't found in results. It's found in defiance, in the quiet act of pushing, even when nothing makes sense. Ecclesiastes lives in that space too. It doesn't sugarcoat the void. It looks at it and drinks it slowly, like bitter wine. The writer says there's nothing new under the sun. Empires rise, empires fall. Generations are born, generations are forgotten. Everything repeats. People think this is a statement of despair. It isn't. It's a cure for arrogance. It breaks the fever of self-importance. You are not the center. I am not the center. Humanity is not the center. We are a brief echo in a vast corridor. And yet, there's a strange peace in that. Blaise Pascal once wrote, "Man is but a reed, the weakest in nature, but he is a thinking reed. Our fragility is not a flaw, it's the ground on which consciousness blooms. Knowing we're temporary doesn't have to paralyze us. It can wake us up. When nothing is guaranteed, every breath becomes a small rebellion against the void. That's why Ecclesiastes says, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart." It's not hedonism, it's clarity. It's not saying nothing matters. It's saying if nothing is guaranteed, then every small moment matters more than anything. The sunset, the laughter, the hand you hold knowing it will one day vanish. This is not the shallow optimism of motivational speeches. It's the brutal joy of the lucid. Franz Kafka once said, "Even in the darkest of nights, I will keep walking. Not because I believe the light will come, but because the darkness itself demands it." That's what faith looks like when all the decorations are stripped away. Not certainty, not reward, just the raw act of existing fully, even when the sky is silent. Clarice Lispector said it too, in her own way. "I live without knowing why, but I live." This isn't nihilism, it's maturity. It's standing at the edge of meaning and realizing that the abyss isn't your enemy, it's your witness. It watches everything pass, including you. And still, you breathe. Still, you walk. Still, you live. Some people will call this surrender. It isn't. It's revolt without shouting. It's what Albert Camus called the gentle indifference of the world. The world doesn't care, and that can either break you or free you. Ecclesiastes stands with the free. It teaches you how to live in the ruins without needing them to become a temple, how to hold the fragile without demanding it last forever, how to love without pretending it's immortal. In a world obsessed with meaning, maybe the bravest thing you can do is live without guarantees. Not because nothing matters, but because everything does. Ecclesiastes is not a book for the innocent. It's for those who have already lost something. Those who've seen the inside of hospitals at 3 a.m. Those who've buried dreams and stood in the rain without metaphors. It doesn't offer comfort, because comfort belongs to those who still believe that life is fair. What it offers is a mirror, a reflection of how small we are and how real that smallness can be. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath. Ecclesiastes 3:19. That verse isn't poetic, it's a punch in the chest. Humans spend entire lives building towers of meaning, pretending they're more than animals, pretending that live forever in some glorious continuation. But the earth swallows kings and beggars the same way. The wind doesn't remember names. History forgets faster than we like to think. And yet, this isn't a call to despair. It's a stripping away of illusions. When you stop pretending that life is a story about you, you finally see it for what it is, a brief, raw, uncontrollable movement of time. Arthur Schopenhauer said, "We are like lambs playing in a field, while the butcher sharpens his knife out of sight." That's not cynicism, that's honesty. And honesty hurts because it cuts through the performance we've built to protect ourselves. Religion, ideology, nationalism, love, even ambition, they're all fragile masks against the great silence. Emile Cioran once wrote, "We are all deep in a hell, each moment of which is a miracle." He wasn't glorifying pain. He was exposing the paradox of existence, how suffering and wonder live side by side, inseparable. That's why Ecclesiastes doesn't give a solution. It gives a language to those who can't pray anymore, to those who've been betrayed by certainty. It allows you to say what others silence, that maybe the world doesn't make sense, that maybe justice won't come, that maybe meaning isn't waiting behind the curtain. But something happens when you stop running from that silence. It doesn't destroy you. It makes you sharper, quieter, aware. You stop expecting the sky to explain itself. You stop begging the universe for fairness. You begin to live without contracts. That's where a strange kind of strength is born. Not the strength of the hero who conquers, the strength of the witness who endures. Carl Jung called this holding the tension of the opposites. To see the beauty and the horror, the light and the void, the prayer and the silence, without picking a side, without needing resolution. That's spiritual adulthood. That's what Ecclesiastes points to. Life is not a story with a clear ending. It's a series of breaths between arrival and disappearance. And in between, you get fragments. A laugh, a wound, a sunrise, a goodbye. That's it. That's everything. Albert Camus understood this when he said, "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer." Not because the world changed, but because he stopped asking it to. Faith that survives this fire is different. It's not based on answers. It's built on silence, doubt, and the fragile decision to stay, to breathe, to see, even when nothing is promised. That is where Ecclesiastes ends, not with a triumphant revelation, but with a whisper. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. It's not the fear of punishment, it's reverence for something bigger than explanation, something you don't control, something that doesn't need to explain itself to you. That line isn't submission, it's humility, the kind that isn't forced, the kind that comes when your illusions have burned away, and what remains is only the silence and the quiet, almost imperceptible pulse of being alive. The last lines of Ecclesiastes don't shout. They don't offer a miracle or a new prophecy. They simply stand there like a stone in the desert, cold, silent, unmovable. Fear God and keep His commandments, for God will bring every deed into judgment. Ecclesiastes 12:13-14. Most people read that as a warning. It isn't. It's a reminder you are not the center. Your understanding is not the axis of the universe. There's something beyond you that doesn't bend to your questions. This is not the faith of those who need constant comfort. It's the faith of those who have walked through darkness and stopped expecting light to be soft. It's not about answers. It's about reverence in the absence of clarity. Soren Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith. Not because faith is irrational, but because it exists beyond reason's ability to control the world. It's what happens when your mind has run out of explanations and your soul refuses to collapse. It's the quiet act of standing when nothing holds you up. Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote, "To love life more than its meaning." That is the core of this strange, unsettling book. Ecclesiastes doesn't hand you meaning. It forces you to confront its absence, then decide whether you'll keep breathing anyway. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid this confrontation. They drown themselves in distractions, in noise, in the endless chase for significance. They build small empires of self-importance, hoping time will forget to erase them. But time forgets everyone. The wise, the foolish, the kind, the cruel. All end the same way. Dust returning to dust. Once you stop fighting that truth, something unexpected happens. Not despair, freedom. Not numbness, clarity. When you know everything is temporary, you stop treating the temporary like it's eternal. You stop living like the world owes you explanations. And you start living like someone who knows they will be forgotten and loves anyway. Marcus Aurelius, facing that same truth centuries later, wrote, "Soon you will have forgotten everything, soon everything will have forgotten you." He didn't write this in despair, he wrote it as liberation. To be small is not a curse, it's a truth. To be forgotten is not a tragedy. It's the condition of everything that breathes. In a world where empires fall and stars burn out, your existence is both meaningless and miraculous. You don't need to prove your worth to the void. You don't need to control what cannot be controlled. You are a passing flame, and that is enough. Emile Cioran called this the dignity of disappearance. To accept the ending without rage. To live without needing the world to remember your name. To breathe as if each second is both nothing and everything. This is what Ecclesiastes offers. Not comfort, not certainty, but a kind of brutal peace. The peace of those who have looked at the abyss and stopped begging it to speak. The peace of those who can hold the silence without needing it to turn into a song. This is where faith and nihilism touch. Not in slogans, but in the quiet space where you understand that the world doesn't owe you meaning, and you live anyway. You walk, you love, you break, you rebuild, you die, and the wind moves on, indifferent and infinite. That's not a tragedy. It's the structure of everything. To live with that knowledge isn't to give up. It's to live awake. To stand naked before the vastness and whisper, not to be heard, but because you are still here.